Yahweh is the name of the state god of the ancient kingdom of Israel and later the kingdom of Judah. His name is composed of 4 Hebrew consonants, YHWH, known as the Tetragrammaton, which the prophet Moses is said to have revealed to his people and is sometimes given in English as Jehovah. The meaning of the name has been interpreted variously as I am, he that is, he who makes that which has been made, Yahweh Asher Yahweh, he brings the hosts into existence, and according to the philosopher Rabbi Moses Maimonides denotes absolute existence or the totality of existence. At this time, I would like to make some connections between the deity we call Yahweh and the pineal gland, also known as the seat of the soul. This is also called the mind, that which resides over matter. It is also known as the crown chakra, which is the highest chakra. This explains why Yahweh is also referred to as the Most High. The crown chakra is also referred to as the vault of heaven and the throne of God. Note that the word God is another word for guide, and it is the mind that guides the body. The mind sits on a dimensional plane above the body, just right outside of the quote-unquote physical dimension. This location is what we have been taught to refer to as heaven, and it is the origin point of all things in manifestation. The mind represents God ruling the earth realm / physical body from heaven, which is the thought realm. This concept is the oldest understanding of how the spirit realm / thought realm governs the quote-unquote physical realm, and it is the foundation for the popular proverb, mind over matter. The proverb, mind over matter, can be interpreted as heaven over earth. The name Yahweh is also interpreted as he who brings the hosts into existence. This is because it is the crown chakra that gives birth to all of the other chakras. We exist as multiple versions of the self within multiple alternate universes, and the base reality represents Yahweh / Eden, which is the reality in our minds. This reality shapes our perception of the reality around us, and in fact, the reality we create around us is a direct reflection of the reality in our minds. We are in essence projecting our reality from the inside out, but the inner reality is the one true reality, and it gave birth to the many fake / simulated realities. This one true reality is also what some call absolute existence. The absolute self, which is the base / center self, also known as Yahweh, gave birth to the hosts, which are the alternative versions of the self that exist outside of the center self as chakra layers. Again, this is why the name Yahweh is also interpreted as he brings the hosts into existence. This can also be looked at as the rock that causes a ripple effect or the seed of creation. One of the titles of Yahweh is he who brings the hosts into existence. I wanted to talk about that particular interpretation of the name Yahweh, that particular meaning of the name Yahweh. He who brings the hosts into existence. As I mentioned previously, the hosts represent the chakra layers. So just like in the case of Vishnu, where Vishnu have his many avatars, it is Vishnu, the Most High, or the one that's personifying the crown chakra. It is Vishnu that is synonymous of El or Yahweh. So in this case, Vishnu brings the hosts into existence, meaning Vishnu brings his avatars into existence. The Most High is the most potent form of the self. Once it falls from the base reality, just like anything that falls, it shatters. So this single consciousness called El split his consciousness into different avatars. And those avatars split their consciousness into different avatars and so forth and so on. In the case of Jesus Christ, they got rid of the avatar concept for the disciples. But all of these gods had a multitude of followers that were present with them. And what these gods represented was the center self, the base self. And again, this self gives birth to all of the many fake alternative selves. And this is what it means by Vishnu having avatars, you having chakra layers. So Vishnu represents this center self. Again, you can see that as the trunk of a tree, surrounded by the many branches. So the main branch of the tree would be the trunk. And this trunk gives birth to many other trunks, or what we call branches that grow out from it. So one of the meanings of the name Yahweh is he who brings the hosts into existence. I want to take a minute to read the etymology of host and break it down to you in relation to what I'm saying about the chakra layers. So the etymology reads, a person who receives guests. That would be a host. So in the case of Vishnu, his many avatars would be his guests. They all share a place within this singularity called Vishnu, who acts as one who receives guests. And it says a person who receives guests especially for pay. And this is from the late 13th century, from Old French hoste, meaning hoste, you know, like the root word of hostage. All right. And the word guest also means host, hostess. It also means landlord. All right. Landlord. And the word landlord is just another way of saying the Lord of the land or the God of this world. It's also from the Latin word hospitum, which means guest, stranger, sojourner, visitor. Hence also foreigner. Also host, one bound by ties of hospitality. We read on, it says, this appears to be from pi, which is ghost pot, a compound meaning guest master. Compare Old Church Slavonic gospodi, which means Lord or master, literally Lord of strangers, from the roots of gostai, meaning stranger, guest, host, and poti, which means powerful Lord. The etymological notion is of someone, quote unquote, with whom one has reciprocal duties of hospitality. The biological sense of, quote unquote, animal or plant having a parasite, a host, meaning because they're a guest in your body. But what's interesting about the word host is that we know that the Lord is a spirit, not a mortal man, and that a spirit is a ghost. And we see the word host in the word ghost. And that is because our ancestors saw our body as a dead man walking. We pretty much think about life and death backwards. The ancestors felt like the earth was the realm of the dead and that your body was literally your ghost. Now, a ghost is a apparition of light or a flash of light. And we call our body our flesh, which is the word flash. Our body is just a hologram of light that's fading into existence. We call that conception and birth, and fading out of existence. We call that death and decomposition. Our ancestors saw the earth realm as a spiritual realm, and they saw us humans as spirits. They didn't really have a concept of physicality in the sense that we do. So our ancestors literally saw the body as a ghost, and we see the word host inside of it. We talk about being inside of a simulation and trying to get out of it as if we're being held hostage or hostage. So the word has a lot of connections to the point that I'm making right now. Also, if we bounce back, we see that from Old French, the word host comes from the word oste, and oste is the root word of ostera. Which is a Greek goddess that represents rebirth, renewal, which is what our avatars represent, rebirth, renewal. Because the fact that we got many avatars, we gotta be born out of each one. And the way that we do that is through rebirth, renewing the self, and new alternate experiences in alternate realities. The crown chakra is also called the Most High. The Most High, or the highest chakra, created the lower chakras. This is a pyramid that is built from the top down. This means that the mind, which is the Most High, is projecting the body / most low into existence. Saying that the Most High created the earth is another way of saying that the spirit realm creates the quote-unquote physical realm, or that the mind projects the body into existence. Note that the crown chakra is the only one that exists outside of the body. This out-of-body location is what we refer to as heaven, which is the abode of God. The mind is the light of conception, and it exists even before the heart is formed. The proverb, "I think, therefore I am," is teaching us how we first existed by becoming self-aware spiritual beings before we entered bodies. All things start from a thought, and that even includes the self. The mind existed before the heart. Again, it is the mind that projects the body into existence. Our mothers and fathers are like the 6-9 polarizing winds that form a vortex and open the gates of creation to us. It's like each parent is holding open one of the doors to the gate for us, allowing us to enter creation. We enter creation as pure mind / consciousness, and this is called conception. It is signified by a bright light. In the Bible, it is referred to as the Star of Bethlehem that was seen by the 3 wise men. This story simply means that ancient doctors knew the science of conception and how the consciousness arrives before the body is formed. It is also the consciousness that forms the body around itself. We are not the body. We are the consciousness that reside within the body. We do not die when we stop breathing. We die when we stop thinking. Since we never stop thinking, the consciousness is the part of us that never dies. It wanders on forever, evolving itself by learning new things. The mind existed before the heart. That which thinks exists before all things manifested, if all things are manifested from that which thinks. Remember that even the heart is a thought, and therefore could have not existed before the mind or that which thinks. What I'm sharing with you is the science behind how our minds manifest our bodies. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." In this scripture, God refers to himself as the mind / consciousness. Our minds or consciousness enters the womb before the body is formed. This is what's called conception, and it takes place before birth. This represents the arrival of the soul. Again, the soul's arrival is signified by the light of conception, or what Christians call the Star of Bethlehem. God says, "Before you were born, I set you apart." This means that before you were born, you were conceived and distinguished from all others, because we all have a unique essence, energy, and vibration that only we can manifest. We all have a unique personality and a fingerprint that no one else on earth can make. This distinguished part of us that expresses itself through the body is what is referred to as God/consciousness. The three wise men must have been ancient doctors of their time, because the title of wise men refer to doctors, politicians, men during the ancient society that would have been professionals in certain fields. In this case, the wise men would have been doctors dealing with childbirth. And the birth of Christ doesn't represent some miraculous birth. It's really the story of conception. It's all of our stories. So the coming of the Christ, or the coming of the baby, is first signified by the light of conception. Again, this was called the Star of Bethlehem in the Bible. When the soul lands in the fetal bag, it starts to form a body around itself, and then it seats itself in that body at the location we call the pineal gland, or the seat of the soul/throne of God. From this position, it controls the body and is referred to as the mind. And since our thoughts dictate our actions, the proverb "mind over matter" will always hold true, just as well as the biblical saying, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." As the name of the Supreme Being was considered too holy to be spoken, the consonants YHWH were used to remind one to say the word Adonai, which means Lord, in place of the God's name. A common practice throughout the Near East, in which epithets were used in referencing a deity. All of these stipulations and details were applied to the god later. However, it is unclear exactly when Yahweh was first worshipped, by whom, or how. Scholar Nissim Amzalag of Ben Gurion University disagrees with the claim that Yahweh's origins are obscure, and argues that the deity was originally a god of the forge and patron of metallurgists during the Bronze Age, around 3500 to 1200 BCE. Amzalag specifically cites the ancient copper mines of the Timna Valley in southern Israel, biblical and extra-biblical passages, and similarities of Yahweh to gods of metallurgy in other cultures for support. Note that brass is an alloy of copper and zinc, and that bronze is an alloy of copper and other metals, including aluminum, manganese, nickel, or zinc, and sometimes non-metals such as phosphorus, or metalloids such as arsenic or silicon. The point is that Yahweh would later take the form of a brazen/bronze bull, and also as a form of Christ with feet like burnt brass. Real quick, concerning Christ having feet like burnt brass, it's because one of the many forms of Christ was a golden calf that they call Moloch, and they burnt incense at the feet of Moloch for offerings. And over time, the incense would darken the feet of this golden statue due to the smoke and the heat. So this is why it's taught that Jesus had feet like burnt brass, because Jesus's original image was simply a brass statue that they burnt offerings to. Bronze and brass are the two main metals used in connection with Yahweh, and they both are copper-based alloys. Copper is the main metal used in ancient electricity-based technology, and it is also used for many forms of healing and health purposes. Even today, copper armbands, knee bands, and etc. are used to heal joint pain. Copper was also a big deal to later inventors like Nikola Tesla as well. This is very important since Yahweh was a healing god and the main two metals that are associated with the deity are both copper-based alloys. Copper was often used for healing purposes in ancient days. We use the word cop to refer to officers of the law, and the word cop is short for copper. This is because cops normally wore badges that were forged from copper-based alloys, and not to mention that most of these badges resemble the star of Yahweh/Moloch, or the star of the golden calf. It is also referred to as the Star of Bethlehem. I believe that the calf of Moses' time would have been made of bronze or brass, and that the term golden calf only refers to the color of bronze or brass. In other words, in modern times, we would refer to it as the gold-toned calf. Gold-toned jewelry is jewelry that can be made of copper-based alloys and others, and it is often gold-plated or designed to resemble real gold. This idea is supported by the fact that the calf was also called the brazen bull, and the word brazen means made of brass. Also, keep in mind that in the original story, we are told that the calf was forged mainly from recycled earrings. Imagine how many gold earrings it would take to forge a calf the size of the one mentioned. This fact alone gives light to the idea that the calf could have been made from copper-based alloys. This does not mean that there was no gold at all. It means that not everyone in Moses' crowd would have been wealthy enough to afford gold earrings, and that the main metal used to forge the calf would have been a copper-based alloy with a small percentage of gold. Also note that the bull on Wall Street is made of bronze. As I mentioned, Yahweh was not a God that was exclusive to the Israelites. And because we can find several forms of Yahweh all around the world, to me, that doesn't support the fact that the religion of Yahwehism had gained that much prominence through conquest. Because we can see in history other nations fighting back and Yahweh rising and falling. The reason that the concept of Yahweh is so universal and we can find some form of Yahweh all around the world, and the reason that Yahweh wasn't exclusive to the Israelites, is because the spiritual concept that Yahweh is personifying, that wasn't exclusive to the Israelites. So everyone had their own way to personify this universal concept. It was a universal concept. It wasn't exclusive to one group of people. And because the whole world knew about this knowledge, everybody had personified it their own way. So when we look around the world, we say, man, everybody got a God that's similar to Yahweh. Or there are so many different forms of Yahweh around the world. All right. When the truth is that the whole world understood the knowledge that Yahweh embodied. And so they embodied that knowledge their own way in their own lands. And it ain't that the Christians taught them this knowledge. This was knowledge that was known and universal to everyone. And again, everyone personified the knowledge. Personification is a good way to teach children. This is how you make knowledge universal. You don't make it exclusive to adults or older people or teenagers. So you find a way to teach this knowledge to every single body, every age group, every gender, so that it's universal. And personification and symbolism was one way to teach this advanced knowledge to younger people. It's just that the world got so dumbed down, older people started learning through the symbolism. And when we stopped learning through the symbolism, we literally just started worshiping the symbols, engaging in the worship of graven images and idolatry. Because when you lose the knowledge
of these graven images, the graven images themselves become the object of worship versus the knowledge or the spiritual concept that they embodied that would set the people free.
Although the Bible, and specifically the book of Exodus, presents Yahweh as the God of the Israelites, there are many passages which make clear that this deity was also worshipped by other peoples in Canaan. Amzalag notes that the Edomites, Kenites, Moabites, and Midianites all worship Yahweh to one degree or another, and that there is evidence the Edomites who operated the mines at Timnah converted an earlier Egyptian temple of Hathor to the worship of Yahweh. My research shows that Yahweh and Hathor either became blended together as one deity to certain cultures, or that they are just different forms of the exact same deity. Later in this research, I will prove that the latter is true. Not only that they are different forms of the same deity, but also that they are just different interpretations of the same one universal concept about the seat of the soul. The meaning of the name Yahweh, as noted, has been interpreted as I am or he that is, though other interpretations have been offered by many scholars. In the late Middle Ages, Yahweh came to be changed to Jehovah by Christian monks, a name commonly in use today. The old proverb, I think therefore I am, is referring to the observer/self as one of the names of God/Yahweh, which is I am. The phrase I am is directly related to self-awareness, consciousness, and acknowledging one's being or existence in its most comprehensive sense, the sense of that which exists as a person or thing, as in human being.
So one of the many meanings of the name Yahweh simply means to be, to exist. And we went over that previously. I just wanted to add to that with a bit of etymology here. So the etymology of the word be, as we see here, it says beyond, beyond, beyond. And my thing about the second word, beom, B-E-O-M, right, is that is also another way of writing the word beam, which is B-E-A-M, and to be is based upon the spirit beaming itself into the body, or what we call projecting the consciousness in and out of the body. Another word for projecting is beaming. So if existing or to be is based upon projecting, then it would make sense that the word being would have the root word be in it, B-E. So when you break the word being down, it's like you're saying be I am, because the name of God is I am. And this lightsaber represents the seat of the soul. This is the true self. We're beings of light. And to say beings of light is to say beams of light, because we all are projections of the center self, because we all exist as an avatar that's being projected or beamed into existence by the true self or the base self. So that's very important that we find the word be in the front of being, and the word being can be looked at as be I am or be God, which is the light. So the etymology of be is to exist, to come to be. And we're dealing with the verb form, to become, to happen. We got to keep in mind that the name Yahweh isn't really a name, it's a verb. right? And that's one of the problems people have with the name I am, with the title I am. Because if the word jump means to thrust yourself into the air, which is an action, then the word Yahweh means to be, to exist, which is an action. So a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. Your name is a noun. Jumping, existing, and all of that, that's not a noun, that's a verb. So the name of God isn't a name really. It's an action, it's a verb. God is something that you do. It's not something that you worship. It's not a person. It's not a place. It's not a thing. God is an action that we take to be, to become self-conscious, self-aware of the self. Those people that practice this action are the ones that we call God, but we're calling them a name or a title, but that name or that title that we're calling them isn't a name or a title, it's a verb. It's like me calling a dude jump who just thrusted himself up into the air. I'm giving him a title based upon the action he took. This is one of the confusing things about the name Yahweh and even the word God itself. It was never a name. It was never a person, a place, or a thing. In antiquity, it was an action, a verb. So as we read on the etymology of be, we go into the Proto-Germanic and it says, I am, I will be, right? And it also says this be root is from pi, meaning bew, which is B-H-E-U-E. We'll talk about that later. We'll look that one up. The word bew means to be, exist, grow. And in addition to the words in English, it yielded the German present first and second person singular, ben or bist, from Old High German, bam, I am, bist, thou art. The Latin perfective tenses of esse, I was, and etc. Old Church Slavonic, byti, which is B-Y-T-I, which means to be. And the Greek word fu, which means become. Old Irish bayu, which means I am. Lithuanian butu means to be. And Russian bite, which means to be. So when they talk about Eve biting the apple, the word bite is the word B-Y-T-E, dealing with a group of binary digits or bits operated on as a unit. And we know that 8 is the number of the Ouroboros. It's the symbol of infinity or the hourglass as well. I got a previous stream where I go deeper into the number 8, the Ouroboros and all of that. But the word bite is dealing with the bitten apple. It's dealing with the simulation. We're talking computer terminology. The word bite, B-Y-T-E, is also pronounced bite. And that becomes the word body. Body, you know, like your meat package, your flesh package. So to be is to exist inside of a body, an avatar, which is why the old church Slavonic word is bati, B-Y-T-E, B-Y-T-I. Also remember that the word Buddha is body, and Buddha went to sleep under the Bodhi tree. And the Bodhi tree just symbolizes, again, the body, the simulation. Buddha projecting himself into the simulation in a body, using the tree of life or the body tree, the Bodhi tree. So the word Bodhi, body, bhakti, all are related to the soul manifesting inside of the simulation within an avatar. We read on, it says, The modern verb to be in its entirety represents the merger of two once distinct verbs. The be root represented by be and the am was verb, which was itself a conglomerate. Roger Lass describes the verb as a quote unquote a collection of semantically related paradigm fragments, while Weekly calls it a quote unquote an accidental conglomeration from the different Old English dialects. It is the most irregular verb in modern English and the most common. Isn't that something? How much we use the word be and don't even really pay attention to it. And just to think that be is directly related to the name I am, which is the name of God. So it says, collective in all Germanic languages, it has 8 different forms in modern English. Be as an infinitive subjunctive imperative, am, present first person singular, are, present second person singular and all plural, is, present third person singular, was, past first and third person singular, were, past second person singular, all plural subjunctive, being, progressive and present participle, been, perfect participle. Interesting. The paradigm in Old English was eon, bio, present first person singular, eot, meaning bist, which is present second person singular, and also that Old English term eot looks a lot like earth, because the earth realm is where we what? Exist, where the body manifests. So now we see the word earth up in there. It goes on to say is, it goes on to say bid. That's crazy because a bid is like a prison sentence and the body is a prism or a prison for the soul. The simulation is like a prison and you don't break out of it. You serve your time. You learn your lesson. And it's crazy that the word bid is a synonym of the word be for that reason. It's also crazy because when we say body or Buddha or bad, you know, you did something bad, right? You got to go serve a bid. That whole BD, you can replace any vowel in between it and you'll get bed. And a bed is like where the soul went to sleep at, which is inside of a body. You see what I'm saying? So the body is like a bed for the soul to lay down in. So bed, bod, which is the root word of body. Bud, which is to grow, to bloom, to blossom, like the word be told us, to become. Bad, which is they call this place the underworld, the bad place. We experience bad before we experience good. Remember, storms and rain come before the rainbow. And we say the best for last. So we go through hell to get to heaven. Hell ain't a place where people burn forever. Hell is a valley that people walk through to get to heaven. So that's very interesting. The word bid, and we can keep playing with that, put a different vowel in between a B and D, and you'll get something that's related to the subject at hand, which is existing in the body. We know that one word the Bible used for bad is sin, the world of sin. And we see that coming up next where it says send with a D on the end and sendun and beod. It also goes on to say the word was or ways, however you want to pronounce this word, which can be looked at as also the past person, third person singular of the modern English form, was, because we can see that they both sound the same and that they both represent the same thing, which is the first and third person singular. We move on and it goes into where with the A on it, and that's similar to our word were. All right, they say it where, and that's crazy because the word where dealing with something when we putting clothes on, when you're donning something, when you're putting something on. In this case, the soul is wearing the body. And when you wear something for so long, it causes what? Wear and tear, which is the aging process. This is just so dope. That's why I love etymology. We're going to skip on over to the third paragraph here. It says the B root had no past tense in Old English, but often served as future tense of am and was. In 13th century, it took the place of the infinitive, participle, and imperative forms of am and was. Later, its plural forms, we beth, ye been, and they be, became standard in Middle English, and it made inroads into the singular, I be, thou beest, and he beth. But forms of R claimed this turf in the 1500s and replaced be in the plural. And then it gives an example here from Macbeth, and I'll read it for you. It says that, but this blow might be the be all and the end all. So when we was reading the etymology of be in the verb sense, it directed us to this next etymology, which is bew. And the word bew or be, when it's spelled B-H-E-U-E, means to be, to exist, or to grow. And then it gives you so many other words that would be a synonym to this. And that's where we're going to have fun at, because it's a few of these words that stick out to me, like the word beam. And I told y'all that, right? I told you that the word beam would go into this list too. And that's like to be, I am. Another one we see is bondage, dealing with a prison, the body being a prison. See, when you say the word person, you can rearrange the word person to say prison. Even the Bible speaks of the earth realm as a realm where people are in bondage. So more words that I see that stand out to me is the word boom, which is dealing with an explosion, which is what life is. Everything is a controlled explosion. The release of energy is what an explosion is. So the next word that stands out to me is long pole. And that can be looked at as the Babel Tower, the central nervous system, the Jedi saber, this rod of light that allows us to exist, what we call the tree of life. So all of this stuff relates. It goes on and it says booth, which is representing electromagnetic field that covers the body, that the body gives off. The word booth, dealing with the cube of Saturn, which is this field. Bound, meaning to be bound, hostage, to be in bondage, right? Or bondage, right? Same thing. So it goes on, it says build, because the body exists in the realm where building takes place, where creation takes place. And again, in contrast, the mind exists in the realm where conception takes place. So as we read on, fiat, that's an interesting word, because we all understand the concept of fiat currency and fiat government. The body can be looked at as a fiat spirit, a fiat form of the self. Okay, let's read this little passage here. It says, it is the hypothetical source of / evidence for its existence is provided by the Sanskrit word bhava, means becoming. Bhavati, becomes or happens. Bhumi, meaning earth or world. The Greek word phaein means to bring forth or to make grow. The word phytos or phyton, meaning a plant, because your body is literally based on the same sacred geometry of a tree or a plant. Nothing has a random shape in nature. Everything is resembling the shape of energy releasing or an explosion pattern. What's very interesting here is that we have the word phytos, which later becomes our modern word photo. And they tell you life is based upon photosynthesis. And the word photo is basically the word phyto, because just like a plant manifests into existence from a seed, a photo manifests into existence from a flash of light, which is similar to your light of conception, which is why they teach us about photosynthesis as the foundation of all life. Life literally manifests the same way that old school photos was produced or synthesized, from a flash of light. And again, that can be seen as the light of conception. As we read on, it says the word physis, which means growth, nature, phylon, which means tribe, class, race, phyle, which means tribe or clan. Now the word phyle, P-H-Y-L-E, became to be our modern word file, F-I-L-E. Our life is just an experience that's being recorded by the pineal gland. And the only thing that we'll take with us is that experience, that record. That record is a file, like a computer file that will go and we will take that experience with us like a file or a record. When we see this word file, it makes perfect sense. And when you rearrange the word file, F-I-L-E, you get the word life, because our life is just an experience that's being recorded by the soul. And it will take that experience with it when it leaves here. It will take that file or that life.
The character and power of Yahweh were codified following the Babylonian captivity of the 6th century BCE, and the Hebrew scriptures were canonized during the Second Temple period, around 515 BCE through 70 CE, to include the concept of a Messiah whom Yahweh would send to the Jewish people to lead and redeem them. Yahweh, as the all-powerful creator, preserver, and redeemer of the universe, was then later developed by the early Christians as their God, who had sent his son Jesus as the promised Messiah, and Islam interpreted this same deity as Allah in their belief system. The Moabite stone, also called the Mesha stele, dates back to around 840 BCE. It commemorates King Mesha's triumph over Israel, noting his appropriation of Yahweh's sacred vessels to Chemosh, the chief god of Moab. Discovered in 1868 in present-day Jordan and published in 1870, the Moabite stone caused a stir as the first non-biblical inscription mentioning Yahweh. It recounts the events of 2 kings, 3 with Mesha's rebellion against Israel, though with a different outcome favoring Moab. The interpretation of Mesha taking Yahweh's vessels supports Yahweh as solely the God of Israelites.
Also, note that all of these names may be pseudonyms and the stories may all be allegories, since King Mesha is the son of Chemosh, who is an ancient Semitic deity whose existence is recorded during the Iron Age. The question would be, how can a mortal man be born of an immortal mythological deity? The key thing to point out is that the word mesh literally means to entangle or to involve, the literal transitive sense of to catch in a net or entangle. This may be referring to a blending of various deities to create a new one. This happened often during wars.
So one thing I find interesting about the name Mesha is that it means to mesh or to entangle, to bring something together. And what this king represents is a war and a turning point within Yahwehism where two different entities would blend their concepts into one. This happens often in war, like I mentioned earlier. When two nations go to war, you get this new deity that's born out of the blending of those two nations' deities. And this happened a lot with Yahweh, which is why he picked up a lot of different attributes from a lot of the nations that the Christians went to war with. So Yahweh constantly evolved as Christians travel. But what's interesting about the word mesha, meaning to mesh together or to entangle, it sounds very similar to the word Mecca. And we can pronounce the word Mecca as Mesha. And what we see at Mecca is this very powerful religion that we call Islam, which is a religion that is based upon a blending of a bunch of other different religions coming together to create this form of Islam that we see at the Kaaba Cube here in Mecca. So that's very interesting that the word Mecca can be pronounced as Mesha. And when we go to Mecca, we see a meshing together of different ideologies, creating one unified faith. So it is, in my opinion, that a lot of times when we're reading historical events, that we can be given pseudonyms to hide certain important turning points in history that will shed light on the origin of a lot of these deities that we have been indoctrinated to worship. It's almost as if the people that forge history want to keep their identities hidden. So often when we're reading history, we will find a lot of concepts given to us under pseudonyms. And these pseudonyms can have titles like king, queen, or even philosopher.
The discovery of Amenhotep III's mention of the Shasu of Yahweh suggested an earlier historical presence for Yahweh, challenging his Canaanite origins. This supports the theory of Yahweh as a desert god, adopted by the Hebrews during their Exodus. Yahweh's manifestations as fire and cloud in Exodus hint at a desert deity guiding them to water sources. While once thought to originate in southern Canaan, modern consensus suggests Yahweh began as a lesser god in the Canaanite pantheon, with nomadic Shasu likely adopting his worship in the Levant. The Moabite stone has also been reinterpreted in light of recent scholarship, which demonstrates that the people of Moab also worship Yahweh, and the reference to Mesha taking the vessels of Yahweh to Chemosh most likely means he repossessed what he felt belonged to the Moabites, not that he conquered Israel and its God in the name of his own. The Bible does mention other nations worshiping Yahweh and how the God arrived from Edom to help the Israelites in warfare. Deuteronomy 33:2, Judges 5:4-5. But this is not the central narrative. In the Bible, Yahweh is the one true God who creates the heavens and the earth and then chooses a certain people, the Israelites, as his own. Yahweh creates the world and hangs the sun and the moon in the heavens as the book of Genesis opens. He creates animals and human beings, destroys all in a great flood except Noah, Noah's family, and the animals Noah saves, and elects Abram, later known as Abraham, to lead his people to the land of Canaan and settle there. Genesis 1-25.
The many graven images of Yahweh are all images that are personifying a universal and spiritual concept about the seat of the soul. Our consciousness resides above the quote-unquote physical plane, and from here it governs the body. Again, this is why we say mind over matter, and this is why God rules over the earth from heaven. Now that we see how Yahweh is personifying a spiritual concept about consciousness, I would like to segue back to what I said earlier about one of the many manifestations of Yahweh being a golden calf or brazen bull. Before we had graven images that personified this spiritual concept, we had the concept itself stripped of all interpretative personifications. When the original meaning behind these personifications was lost, the graven images became objects of mere idol worship. Idolatry in Christianity and Judaism is the worship of something other than God as if it were. This rule was probably made so that the masses would not lose the spiritual science behind the graven images. And it was probably due to a rise of ignorance surrounding the original meaning of the images, which would have led to a rise of mere idol worship of these images without understanding the spiritual knowledge that the images personified. Graven images mark a turning point in the collective spirituality of humanity on earth, where we would go from being self-conscious beings to being God-conscious beings. This marks the beginning of the religious mind, which is based upon worshiping the many graven images as guides or gods and calling upon them for self-empowerment. Knowledge is power. Religion is idolatry, and idolatry is extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. In the case of religion, that something or someone would be God in the form of a graven image. Remember, idolatry in Christianity and Judaism is the worship of something other than God as if it were. And again, in the case of religion, God is being worshipped as a form of a graven image. In this case, the graven image is the thing that is being worshipped as though it were God. Because remember, God is the knowledge of this ancient spiritual concept, and that knowledge will indeed empower us. But religion is the ignorance of this divine knowledge in replace of idol worship. To recap, when humans started forging metals and creating graven images, these graven images were used to personify advanced spiritual concepts. Over time, people became ignorant of the spiritual concepts that the graven images personify and began to worship the personifications. This is still going on today in all world religions. This is why most people in our religious-based world really don't know just how great they are as advanced spiritual beings of light. They find greatness in idols that were created to teach them about the greatness of themselves, but they cannot find greatness within themselves other than the fact that they are servants of that which is great, or that which they think is great. They think that the idols are greater than them, when the idols are only personifying their greatness. My research shows me a decline in the level of collective spiritual knowledge and self-awareness within the masses during the rise of metal-forged deities like Yahweh. This is very powerful when you add the fact that according to scholar Nissim Amzalag, Yahweh was a god of metallurgy. Amzalag writes, an essential link between Yahweh and copper is suggested in the book of Zechariah, where the dwelling of the God of Israel is symbolized by two mountains of copper. In Zechariah 6, verses 1 through 6, in his prophecies, Ezekiel describes a divine being as a man was there whose appearance shone like copper. In Ezekiel 40, verse 3, and in another part of this book, Yahweh is even explicitly mentioned as being a smelter. In Ezekiel 22 and 20, and Isaiah 54 and 16, Yahweh is explicitly mentioned as the creator of both the copper worker and his work. Such an involvement of Yahweh is never mentioned elsewhere for other crafts or human activities. Amzalag further notes the similarities between Yahweh and other gods of metallurgy. The god of metallurgy generally appears as an outstanding deity. He is generally involved in the creation of the world and or the creation of humans. The overwhelming importance of the god of metallurgy reflects the central role played by the copper smelters in the emergence of civilizations throughout the ancient world. Later, we will learn that Yahweh is a war god, and that will make sense when we add that knowledge to the fact that he's a god of metallurgy. Because during war, man needs to know how to forge metals. He needs to know how to smelt alloys and smelt different metals and alloys. Of course, this is very important for gun making and sword making and etc. When humans started to forge metals, we started to forge the very first graven images or idols of worship. These forged idols embodied the deeper spiritual concept of the title Most High. Over time, this higher knowledge became lost and buried behind mythologies that were created to bring the graven images to life by giving them a storyline or script. Ever since then, we've been worshiping the many graven images, and without knowledge of the concept itself, we will continue to believe the many childlike mythologies surrounding these metal forged idols. The mythos often tells the story of our soul's journey in the body, which is based on our original spiritual sciences, as I mentioned previously. Without this understanding, the concept of our soul's journey in the body gets hidden behind a more literal interpretation of God's journey on the earth, or a Christ-like doctrine which often consists of some immortal God in heaven sitting on a throne who decides to come down to the earth realm and manifest as a regular mortal man. For this to happen, they have no choice but to make God's birth an immaculate conception. This is because, like I said before, God or guide originally referred to the mind, and the mind does not have a beginning. It always was and always is and is represented by the one seated upon the throne, also known as God. If this is the case, then for God to enter the earth, God has to go directly from the throne to the womb, which is told by the story of the Holy Ghost impregnating Mary. The Holy Ghost is the light of conception that I spoke of previously. Conception took place before birth. It represents the arrival of the consciousness inside of the fetal bag. Amzalag compares the attributes of the Egyptian Ptah and the Mesopotamian Ea/Enki along with Napir of Elam, all gods of metallurgy, with Yahweh, and finds striking similarities. He further claims that the name of the god of the Edomites, Kuos, is an epithet for Yahweh, and notes how the Edomites, a people closely associated with metallurgy, were the primary workers and administrators of the copper mines at Timnah, and further that Edom is never mentioned in the Bible as challenging Israel in the name of a foreign god, thus suggesting that the two peoples worship the same deity.
According to Amzalag, during the Iron Age, around 1200 to 930 BCE, Yahweh transitioned from being one god among many to the supreme deity for the Israelites. This shift occurred as iron replaced bronze, diminishing the significance of copper smelters and their transformative magic. Seeking to distinguish themselves from neighboring cultures for political and military purposes, the Israelites elevated Yahweh above El, associating him with fire, smoke, and warfare. This transformation reshaped Yahweh from a deity of transformation to one of conquest. Miller and Hayes comment, perhaps the most noticeable characteristic of Yahweh in Israel's early poetry and narrative literature is his militancy. The so-called Song of the Sea in Exodus 15, 1-18, and the Song of Deborah in Judges 5 are typical in their praise of Yahweh, the divine warrior who could be counted on to intervene on behalf of his followers. Thus, it may have been primarily in connection with Israel's wars that Yahweh gained status as the national god. During times of peace, the tribes will have depended heavily on Baal in his various local forms to ensure fertility. But when they came together to wage war against their common enemies, they would have turned to Yahweh, the divine warrior who could provide victory. Yahweh as warrior is evident throughout the Hebrew scriptures, which became the Christian Old Testament, and warrior imagery is also apparent in passages in the New Testament, which drew on the earlier works. Ephesians 6:11, Philippians 2:25, 2 Timothy 2:3-4, 1 Corinthians 9:7, among others. By the time these works were written, the worship of Yahweh had undergone a dramatic transformation from what it had been in the early days of the Israelites in Canaan. The English language doesn't have an exact translation of the word Yahweh, so in our Old Testament, we see it written as Lord in all capital letters. In Jewish tradition, Yahweh is too sacred a name to utter out loud. Over time, Jews started to substitute in Adonai or my Lord, especially when speaking. Another common replacement is the name Elohim, which simply means God. What's interesting is that these two replacement names are both used for other things as well, not just God, whereas Yahweh is reserved exclusively as a name for God. We see in Exodus 3:14 that God uses I am and Yahweh interchangeably, which tells us that I am is the one way for us to translate the name Yahweh. Yahweh is the Hebrew word for the self-revealed name of the God of the Old Testament. It comes from the Hebrew verb to be. At its core, Yahweh means to be. The English Bible translates it as Lord in all capital, which distinguishes it from Lord in lowercase, which is translated as master. There is one more observation to make in these verses. The translators change between I am and Lord in all capitals. The verbal form is translated as I am, and the noun form is translated as Lord. The easiest way to explain the difference is with an illustration. For example, I could say, I run, verbal form, and to even make this example more explicit, I run that I run. It doesn't make a lot of sense, I know. But then I could say, I am a runner, noun form. Or to make it more explicit, what if my teammates decided to name me Run? They would be saying, he is so good at what he does that from now on we are going to call him Run. And then, one day, I send some of my teammates to recruit an up-and-coming runner, and as I send them out, I say, tell him that Run has sent you.
Not all English translations agree on how to translate the noun form of I am. The reason is Hebrew doesn't have vowels in their words. Usually, that was no problem at all, but there is some discrepancy when it comes to I am. So when it comes to the name Yahweh, if the vowels are taken out, you are left with YHWH. As a result, some read it as Yahweh or transliterated into Jehovah. The Y makes a J sound and the W makes a V sound. Others read it as Yahweh. The other problem was that the Hebrew people had such a reverence for God that they didn't dare speak the name YHWH for fear of using his name in vain. So, with time, there wasn't even a verbal account passed down through the oral tradition of how to pronounce the name. And then, in the 3rd century BC, the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek. This translation, called the Septuagint, translated YHWH as Kurios, which translated into English as Lord.
So before we move on, it's important to note that one of the most famous forms of the concept of El seen in a deity is a god holding a scepter. One that you're familiar with may be the Lion of Judah with the scepter in his hand, or some of you may be familiar with the Pharaoh holding the Jedi Tower, or Moses holding his serpent staff. This is a very common pose. Another very familiar one is Thor holding his hammer. So we're very familiar with this pose. Most of us grew up seeing it on a baking soda box from Arm& Hammer. And another deity that you probably didn't think about was Santa Claus with the candy cane. So the reason that I brought all of that up, because another deity that I wanted to throw in that lineup was Orion. All of these different deities represent the same concept. There are no different gods or different deities in the world. There's just a bunch of different graven images, all that represents this same universal spiritual concept that the world once knew. So as you can see, Orion is another one that we can throw in our lineup of scepter holding gods. And the reason I wanted to bring up Orion is because one of the translations of the word Yahweh is Lord, and also the word Kurios, Kurios, Kurios. And when I was playing with the word Kurios, it sounded a lot like Sirius to me. You know, that k sound can also be pronounced with the S. So Kurios can be Sirius, which would be Sirius. And this God that we refer to as Yahweh takes the form of Orion in many images. And Orion is the constellation of Sirius or Kurios. Also, Kurios is the root word of curiosity. And one cannot awaken themselves if they are not first curious. What leads one on a quest to gain this higher knowledge is curiosity. I also find that interesting because the root word of curiosity is cure. Guess what, y'all? Curiosity is literally a cure for ignorance. You notice that curious people aren't ignorant. They always asking questions. So all of these words relate for a reason, and I'm just giving you the reasons.
While some modern English translations translate YHWH as Jehovah or Yahweh, many English translations maintain the tradition of the Septuagint by translating the name as Lord. Notice that it's all caps. So whenever you see the word Lord written in all caps, you can know you are reading the self-disclosed name of God, I am. The name Yahweh is also translated as Jave or Java, which is another way of spelling Jehovah. Note once again that Yahweh is personifying the soul or that which rises up from the body upon death. This is symbolic of the genie leaving the lamp, which just happens to be the logo for the computer programming language called Java. The company would have us to believe that the logo is a coffee cup and that the name of the company comes from Java Coffee. If the God Yahweh is also the Lord of the simulation and he created the languages, then it would make more sense for the logo to be a symbol related to Yahweh. This same God Yahweh is the God spoken of in the Bible, which is responsible for destroying the Babel Tower and creating languages. Yahweh, aka the Lord of the Rings / Saturn, is often depicted emerging halfway from the clouds, symbolizing the consciousness seated or rising up out of the brain. This makes more sense when compared to the logo that Java uses, especially when considering the name of the company, which seems to be a play on the name Java. The word Java also has other meanings, and all of them seem to relate to attributes of Yahweh in one way or another. For example, the word Java can also be spelled as Ava, and Ava means bird, life, voice, sound, guarantee, to breathe, and to live. Its origins are unclear, but it may come from the Latin word avis, which means bird or bird-like. It's also the root word of aviation, dealing with flight. The smoke that's rising out of the Java cup can be compared to the sacred bird that rises up out of the ancient Mayan cosmology. They both represent the same concept of the spirit rising up out of the body. For this to happen, the spirit must take flight, which is why the word Ava is another name of this deity that is personifying our soul entering and leaving the earth through the act of taking flight. The reason we see voice associated with the word is because our soul is also a sine wave or sound wave. And just like Nikola Tesla said, we must think in terms of vibration, which is what we are, vibratory beings. And also another word associated with Ava is life, because this is truly our life source, the source of all life, which is the soul. So we also see that this word means to breathe. Ava may also be a version of Eve or Eva, which comes from the Hebrew name Hava, meaning life. In the Persian language, Ava finds likeness in the name Ave, meaning voice or sound. The name Yahweh is also spelled A-W-I, which is Awi, and the etymology of Awi is bird. It also might be the source of Woyo or Oyo, which is the Proto-Indo-European words for egg. This is because the soul can be related to an egg, being that life emerges from it. It also can be seen as a bird, being that this is how our consciousness navigates the heavens. Because of this, in a lot of ancient religious art, we find the motif of a winged egg, which is also called a neph by the Egyptians. Nephs are often surrounded by one or more serpents, or are moon in the form of a serpent called Kemetef.
So that word Java also is the word Ava, which is the word Avi, which means bird, it means fly, okay? And if you think of a javelin, that's literally what the javelin does. It flies like a bird. So again, just showing you how all of these words relate. And like I was saying about the computer company, Java's logo, that ain't a coffee cup. That's a coffin cup.
In general, the egg symbolizes a primeval embryonic form from which the world later emerged. It is an image of totality enclosed within a shell. Biederman, 112. The egg is one of the first religious symbols and is a symbol of fertility and eternity, and typically carries purely positive associations. It is also known to some as the Orphic egg or cosmic egg. Some theosophical sources syncretize the Neph motif with the deity Num, along with Serapis and Pluto. Under the Greek theonym Canufus, this figure adopts a serpent-bodied, lion-headed, leontoidic visage, being particularly common in magical artifacts in late antiquity. It is by proxy frequently associated with the Gnostic Demiurge. Where and when did worship of Yahweh first originate? According to most theologians, that is not an easy question to answer. Theology professor Lowell Handy, author of Among the Host of Heaven, the Syro-Palestinian Pantheon as Bureaucracy, says you should not even bother. Most religious traditions go back so far in time that any information about them becomes so fragmented as to be virtually non-existent. A good deal of studies available on the subject also suffer from confirmation bias, with authors bending over backward in an effort to connect the origins of the Abrahamic religions to their own cultural, ethnic, or religious backgrounds. Some believers might claim that studying the quote-unquote birth of God as a social construct is itself an act of blasphemy. Moses was the first person to whom the God of Abraham revealed his name. The first historical document pointing toward the existence of Yahweh worship is an Egyptian inscription that dates to the rule of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, who lived around the same time as the prophet Moses. The inscription contains the phrase Shasu of Yahweh. The Shasu were a nomadic tribe who lived in northern Arabia. Yahweh, meanwhile, was the name of a place located somewhere in that region. Dutch historian Cornelius Thiel suggested Yahweh worship didn't start in Canaan, but was adopted by proto-Israelites from Arabian contacts. Exodus supports this, with Yahweh revealing himself to Moses among the Kenites. So we know that most modern Christians serve the God of the Bible, which is Yahweh. It's interesting that Christians end their prayers by saying Amen, and that the first historical document pointing toward the existence of Yahweh worship is an Egyptian inscription that dates to the rule of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. Also, something else I would like to point out is the fact that there are a lot of theologians that would say that studying the quote-unquote birth of God as a social construct is itself an act of blasphemy. I think these are just boundaries that the priesthood put in our way to stop us from thoroughly researching the concept of Yahweh. Luckily for you guys, these boundaries won't stop us at all. Yahweh worship also has its roots in an ancient religion of Canaan, the land which God promised to Abraham. Within this polytheistic religion, Yahweh was but one of many deities united under a figure known as El. In the northwestern Semitic language spoken in Canaan, El had multiple meanings. It was the word for God, the name of a specific God, and the title of a god who stood removed from other lesser gods. Among the lesser gods were Yahweh, Asherah, and Baal. Baal's followers later contested Yahweh's dominance in Israel. Yahweh and Baal were two of El's 70 children, each tasked with overseeing a specific region. Baal ruled Canaan, while Yahweh was assigned the land of Israel. During the late Iron Age, as nation-states arose in the Levant, El's vassals gained prominence in their mythological hierarchies. Chemosh, originally assigned to Moab by El, rose in importance in the kingdom of Moab. Similarly, Milcom and Quas, gods of the Ammonites and Edomites, gained significance in their respective regions. Yahweh emerged as the chief god of Israel. Yahweh's dominance in Israel faced challenges. When King Ahab married Jezebel in the 8th century BCE, Yahweh's priests were persecuted, and Yahweh was supplanted by Baal and Asherah. Despite this, faith in Yahweh persisted. Ahab's dynasty fell, and Jezebel met her end through defenestration, which is to be thrown out of a window. Yahweh worship regained strength, leading priests to denounce other gods as false. Baal and Asherah idols were destroyed, and their attributes merged into Yahweh, who became known as El Shaddai, meaning God Almighty in English.
So earlier we spoke about Chemosh, who was originally assigned to Moab by El and rose in importance in the kingdom of Moab. And one thing I wanted to point out about this entity that we call Chemosh is that it sounds similar to Shamash, which is another deity that I'll show you here. And Shamash was the ancient Mesopotamian sun god. what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to be making synchronicities with Chemosh and Shemash to show you that they may indeed be one and the same. And you can see that again, like I mentioned earlier, they are both scepter holding gods. They both is holding the magician's wand in their hand. Another form of that magician's wand is the Ankh, right? And you can see that's what Shamash is holding, just like the pharaoh with his Jedi pillar and other pharaohs with the Ankh in their hand. Same concept of the central nervous system. And we can see that here with Shamash, as well as we can see here with Chemosh. Both being North Pole deities represent the center or the Santa. And you can even see here that Shamash has on the Santa's hat, dealing with the North Pole. Now remember, when we say Chemosh, it has the word mosh in it, which is another way of saying the word mesh or mesha. And we already went over that earlier. This is the god of Mecca. This is the god that exists as a blend of several different gods. So we see the word mosh, which is what we see at the place called Mecca. It's like a big mosh pit, a big gathering, a crowd of people there for an idol, just like at a rock and roll's mosh pit. Same concept in Mecca. A bunch of people is there for an idol, to serve an idol. Mosh is mesh. The same thing, means to entangle, to come together. One thing I find very important about the word Chemosh, right? If you read right here, it says that the name Chemosh or Chemis might have meant bull. That is very important. And I don't even have to tell you why that one's important, because the bull is one of the main images of Yahweh, being a golden calf. So the name Camus also means conqueror, subduer. The word Chemosh is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible under the name Chemos. That's K-E-M-O-S. That word is important because when we say chemistry, chemistry is based upon knowing about the metals and the elements and knowing which ones you can forge together, which ones you can mix together. So again, we find a key word that's related to a god of metallurgy, and that's chemistry.
A lot of my research will reveal to you the attributes of other gods that have been merged into this modern deity that we call Yahweh. And we also know that when it comes to simulation theory, Yahweh is also the god of the simulation. Many people like myself believe that Yahweh is the entity that governs the hive mind, whom we call the archons, or those in power, or the lords of this world. Yahweh, in my belief, is the chief demon of the hive mind, and this is supported in a lot of my other work that I've done previously. This idea is further supported when you think about the fact that what we can be reading here is how Yahweh split his consciousness up into different drones and created a hierarchy among these drones or demons. So you have one singularity called Yahweh that split its consciousness into 70 children, or what we call the 70 children of El, and each of them was tasked with overseeing a specific region. And this can be explaining to us how this singularity called Yahweh created a network by dividing up its consciousness into world leaders, which then would divide their consciousness up into royal families. So the people that we see are just drones, in my opinion, and they all share one mind and one agenda. If you want to learn more about the hive mind as it relates to the god El, the god of the simulation, then you can check out some of the work on my channel, Bro Sanchez TV, where I go into that all the time, and I'm very extensive and very thorough. I left a couple of links to some of those videos in the description area of this documentary, as well as in other areas for your convenience. So the word Lord comes from the mid-13th century. It was the word lavered or lovered from Old English half-lord, meaning master of a household, ruler, feudal lord, or superior, also husband, also God. Translating Latin dominus, Greek kurios in the New Testament, and the Hebrew Yahweh in the Old. Old English half-lord is a contraction of earlier half-weird, literally one who guards the loaves, from laf, which means bread or loaf. It also means keeper, guardian, perceive, watch out for. So this word Lord literally comes from the word loaf garter. And I want to break it down to you because the word loaf comes from the word laugh, which is something we do when something is funny. But this same God that we're talking about is also synonymous with the Demiurge. And the Demiurge is synonymous with many other serpent gods, one of being Satan. That's very interesting because we know that Satan is known for saying, ha, 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 ha. So that's how the word laugh is also related to loaf, because the loaves are the netters. They are the ethereal layers of the earth. And when you say, ha, 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 it's a repetitive pattern, just like the netters make. It's a ripple effect pattern. Each ripple resembles the nets. Ha, 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 ha. And this is how the word laugh and loaf are related. When we call this God the loaf garter, that is another word to mean the God of the earth realm or the loaves. This is the God that governs our chakra layers or our avatars, our many bodies that exist in many alternative universes. But this God does not govern our soul, our true light within. So this is the God of the ethers or netters. Again, this God being synonymous also with Satan, we know that Satan is also synonymous with Santa. And Santa says, ho, 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 ho. That is just another way of saying ha, 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 because Santa and Satan are one and the same, which is why Santa wears Diablo red and he wears black and white, which is the colors of Satanism, red, black, and white. The word Santa also means center. This is the God that represents the center of creation, because the seat of the soul is in the middle of the left and right brain. So this deity is often in the middle of two pillars or two thieves, or you may see him in between a yin and a yang, like the Baphomet. There are many different entities that came and personified this concept of the Most High or the seat of the soul. So the word Lord, meaning loaf garter, just simply means the Lord of the rings or the ethers. Another way we see this play out is Christ breaking the bread. Christ represents the Lord of this world and the creator of this world, which is responsible for the ripple effect, which is why Christ is also called the rock, a rock, or the stone that the builders rejected. The builders are the chakra layers. Our body, or our many avatars, our body is the thing that actually builds, that actually creates. The mind or the soul does not build, it does not create, it simply conceives. So if I say think of a building, you just think of it. You didn't have to go out there and create the building. So this is conception versus creation. So Christ represents this part of us that conceives, or the conceiver. And him breaking the bread represents exactly how the seat of the soul splits through the center of the universe as the North Pole, as the central nervous system, as the pineal gland. And again, this is why the word Santa is also the word center. And the bread is being broken at the center of the loaf, just like we see in all of this ancient cosmology. Our cosmos can be seen as a bunch of slices of bread stacked together, and they're split in the middle. And the one that is creating the crease is the one that we call Christ or crease. He's personifying this split or this crease at the center of the earth, which is the North Pole or the seat of the soul, the connection point that connects all things. So when we read the word Lord, we see that it also means husband. The husband aspect is due to the fact that we are tethered to these netters. So our consciousness has created a version of us on each of these particular dimensional planes or ethers. And you can even see the word ether in the word tethered. So we are tethered to the netters. And when something is tethered with something, it's another way of saying it's merged with something. So that which connects the left with the right is the center, or this deity that we call Demiurge, which is just us saying the merge. DE is the, and MIURGE is another way of writing merge. So when we say Demiurge, we're saying the merge, and the merge take place at the center of the self, or the Santa. Again, this is why Santa, Satan, the Demiurge, all of these deities are synonymous, because they're personifying the same concept. So as we read more of the definition of Lord, it says compare lady, which literally means bread kneader. In Old English, halfeta, which means household servant, literally loaf eater. For the contraction, compare Harold. The modern monosyllabic form emerged in the 14th century, meaning an owner of land or houses. Again, all of this is referring to the deity that governs the simulation. And there are simulations within simulations, or netters within netters, realities within realities. And the deity that governs these is called the owner of the houses, or an owner of land. And this is from the 1300s. The sense in landlord as the usual polite or respectful form of address to a nobleman under the rank of a duke and to a bishop, old from the 1540s. Also as an interjection from the late 14th century, lords, quote unquote, peers of England, especially as represented in Parliament, is from the 15th century. So we see the same loaf eater concept here. So this time it means lady versus husband, which is what it meant earlier. That is something we really need to pay attention to, because one of the meanings of the word Lord is husband, but another meaning of the word Lord is lady. So this term is sort of an androgynous term. How can it be both lady and husband? Again, because the word husband is not dealing with the concept of a male spouse, but a position that is not gender exclusive. And that position is the head of a household, which can be either a male or female. In antiquity, the deities that held this position were called great mothers or mother goddesses, which is why titles like Mother Earth are still used over titles like Father Earth.
So there's just some other deities that I would like to sync to Yahweh, just for more clarity and understanding. We know that Yahweh takes the form of the god Baal, and another form of Baal is Beelzebub, or this chief demon that we call Beelzebub. And in my opinion, my research shows that this demon would be like a high-ranking demon in the hive mind, or within this group we call the Archons, in which we'll talk more of later. Again, Legion was another one of these chief demons. So Beelzebub or Beelzebub is another form of El or Yahweh, and Beelzebub or Beelzebub, and occasionally known as the Lord of the Flies, is a name derived from a Philistine god formerly worshipped in Ekron and later adopted by some Abrahamic religions as a major demon. The name Beelzebub is associated with the Canaanite god Baal. So in theological sources, predominantly Christian, Beelzebub is another name for Satan. He is known in demonology as one of the 7 deadly demons or 7 princes of hell. Beelzebub representing gluttony and envy. The Dictionary Infernal describes Beelzebub as a being capable of flying, known as the Lord of the Flyers or the Lord of the Flies. I think what's interesting about the name Beelzebub as well is that the root word of it is be. And we know that the word Yahweh means to be. And they literally give us the symbol of a bee, which is one of the main symbols of Freemasonry. So the first 2 words of Beelzebub is be, and the next 2 words is El. So the title Baal means Lord, is a Ugaritic and Canaanitic term used in conjunction with the descriptive name of a specific god. Alternatively, the deity's actual name could have been Beelzebub, meaning Lord of the heavenly dwelling. Again, that would be Yahweh, the one hovering in the clouds. See, when you say hover, that's another way of saying hover. Hover. This God is hovering in the heavens. So this word have or hov, dealing with levitation. Again, Lord of the heavenly dwelling, and Beelzebub could have been a derogatory pun used by the Israelites. And just to back up my whole theory about Beelzebub being this chief demon, one of the chief demons of the hive mind, I'm going to read this. It says, Beelzebub is also identified in the New Testament as the devil, the quote-unquote, the prince of demons. Biblical scholar Thomas Kelly Shine suggested that it might be a derogatory corruption of Beelzebub. And Zebul, again, has the word bull in it, and we can't escape that the bull Apis is another symbol of Osiris, which is Orion. I mean, I'm just connecting all the dots here. So it also means Lord of the high place, referring to heaven, or High Lord. So in the Gnostic tradition, texts of the Gospel of Nicodemus vary. Beelzebul and Beelzebub are used interchangeably. The name is used by Hades as a secondary name for the devil, but it may vary with each translation of the text. Other versions separate Beelzebub from the devil. According to the teachings of the modern Gnostic movement of Samael and Weor, Beelzebub was a prince of demons who rebelled against the Black Lodge during the World War II and was converted by Aeon Weor to the White Lodge. In Christian tradition, Beelzebub is commonly described as placed high in hell's hierarchy. According to the stories of the 16th century occultist Johann Weyer, Beelzebub led a successful revolt against the devil, is the chief lieutenant of Lucifer, the emperor of hell, and presides over the order of the fly. So this guy by the name of Sebastian Michaelis associated Beelzebub with the deadly sin of pride, one of the other 7 deadly sins. And according to Peter Bensfield in his 1589 treatise on confessions by evildoers and witches, Beelzebub was the demon of gluttony, whereas Francis Barrett asserted that Beelzebub was the prince of idolatry. In Judaism, rabbinical literature commentary equates the Beelzebub of Akron as Lord of the Fly. The word Beelzebub in rabbinical texts is a mockery of the worship of Baal, which ancient Hebrews considered to be idol worship. Jewish scholars have interpreted the title of Lord of the Flies as the Hebrew way of calling Baal a pile of excrement and comparing Baal followers to flies. So there are other associations, one being Baal Hammon, meaning Lord Hammon was the chief god of Carthage. He was a weather god considered responsible for the fertility of vegetation and esteemed as king of the gods. Who else was called king of the gods? King of kings and Lord of lords. Right, Jesus. Jesus also takes an earlier form as the god Serapis, who also wore this same cup on his head. So we know another form of Jesus is Serapis, and Serapis wear this same cup that Baal Hammon wears. And at the end of all your prayers, you say, Amen. That's in honor of this god called Baal Hammon. So he was also depicted as a bearded older man with curling ram's horns, right? We call him the devil. And there are many other forms of this bearded man. So we're going to be syncing together some other gods that's synonymous with this same deity. They all are old bearded men with horns. Odin, Narmer, Nimrod, the list goes on. Others have proposed Hammon as a syncretic association with the Egyptian god Amun. And this is the same god that we're referencing at the end of our Christian prayers. So again, others have proposed Hammon as a syncretic association with the Egyptian god Amun, while a last current has called instead for a connection with the Northwest Semitic word Hammon, meaning brazier, suggesting the sense Lord of the brazier. And I don't think it got to be one or the other. That's the beautiful thing about syncretism. It shows you how they all are the same deity or different forms of the same spiritual concept being embodied as an idol, as a graven image. This god goes by the title of Lord of the Brazier. And what is a brazier? A brazier is basically like a torch. It's a metal box or a bowl. It's a container used to burn charcoal in it. And again, that's why I showed you all of those gods previously that holds torches. The magician that holds the wand, and the Statue of Liberty that's holding the torch, Thor holding the hammer. Because the Lord of the brazier is what the Statue of Liberty is holding. It's like a torch. It's a burning torch. So if you read on, it'll say braziers have been used since ancient times. The Nimrod brazier dates to at least 824 BC. And we know that the word Nimrod is another word for Nimrod. The rod in the word Nimrod is related to the central nervous system, the scepter, the Jedi pillar, the magician's wand. You see where it says the Interpretatio Gracia identified him with the Titan Kronos, which is the god of time. And you can see Kronos is holding that hook in his hand. And who else do we see with that? Santa Claus with the candy cane. This is just another form of that scepter, that torch, that brazier. And here's just another image of Baal Hammon. And you can compare that to Serapis, another cup-headed god. And these gods all take the form of serpent deities as well. So this god called Yaldabaoth is another form of Baal Hammon, and is otherwise known as Jaldabaoth or Ealdabaoth. And it is a malevolent god and demiurge, creator of the material world, in various Gnostic sects and movements, sometimes represented as a ethereomorphic lion-headed serpent. He is identified as the false god who keeps the souls trapped in physical bodies, imprisoned in the material universe. Just like I told you guys earlier, right? That Yahweh is the Lord of the simulation. And if you look at the sacred geometry of this God, well, of course, he's holding a sickle or a form of the candy cane, his own form of the arch. But if you look at the sacred geometry of him, there's another God with this same sacred geometry called Abraxas. And all of these serpent-legged deities are called anguipeds. So an anguiped is a kind of divinity that is often found on magical amulets from the Greco-Roman period and is characterized by having serpents for legs. And the reason the ancestors created these deities was to teach higher science about the seat of the soul, like I've been telling y'all. The same thing with Yahweh. The reason that they got serpent legs is because they are personifying the pineal gland. If you look at this dark space in the middle of the brain, it's in the center. That's called Santa. And this is another form of Santa, or that spot in the center of the brain. These deities were used to teach higher science about the seat of the soul. And again, those serpent legs are proof that this is just a personification of the pineal gland or the seat of the soul. So Yaldabaoth and Abraxas are one and the same. And you can see Yaldabaoth holding that scepter. So when we see the Lion of Judah with the scepter, it's just another form of Yaldabaoth, as we see here. This is also the barber pole. This is also the God that Moses worshiped in the form of a staff with a serpent wrapped around it. Whenever you see the serpent wrapped around the deity, it's also synonymous with Yaldabaoth. Who else wrapped themselves in a serpent? The God I mentioned earlier, his name Buddha, remember? Buddha was wrapped in a serpent. Many other gods are wrapped up in serpents. There were also gods called Hindu Naginis that were wrapped in serpents, or either they just had serpent feet like Abraxas. That's how you get the genie with the little tail, with the feet that come to one point like a tail. That became the devil's goatee. The gateway into the simulation is the mothership or the female uterus, and you can see the sacred geometry here with the uterus as well, because all of this stuff was originally used to teach about how the soul enters the earth and how it leaves the earth, like I mentioned earlier with childbirth and conception. Today we got all of these ugly, weird looking deities, which was originally used to teach about this advanced knowledge. But again, once we lost this advanced knowledge, it gave birth to spookism and us being God-fearing, and us started to really take these personifications literally and worship them, which is idolatry. So remember, another word they use in replace of Yahweh is Adonai. And I'm going to go deeper into the word Adonai later, but the word Adonai is just another way of saying Odin or Eden or Aten, because Eden is the location of this deity, which is the North Pole, which is the center of the self, the central nervous system. So Adonai is Eden's eye. It's the portal that's opened up at the middle of the earth, or the Eden's eye, or Aten's eye, because this deity also takes the form of an all-seeing eye, and its name is Odin or Aten. So you're saying Aten's eye, Aten's eye. And if you look at pictures of Odin, you will notice he has one eye. If you look at pictures of Aten, he's only showing you one eye. When I was telling you about how this deity takes the form of many deities that's holding a scepter in their hand, Other gods that's not holding a scepter will be actually holding their phallus. So later, they turned the word spine into the word penis. In the original spiritual system, we taught that the spinal cord, the central nervous system, was that which allowed us to resurrect, that which made resurrection possible. Later, one of the things they did to hide this knowledge, in addition to the idol worship, was create this whole concept of phallus worship. The obelisk originally meant the Jedi Tower. We see the pharaoh with the Jedi pillar in his hand. That's representing the central nervous system or the backbone of Osiris. That's where the consciousness resides. This was what the obelisk originally represented before they start teaching us that these was a bunch of penises all over the place. So we see that the word penis and the word spine have the exact same letters for this reason. Shout out to Awakening Minds for that etymology. So something else that I think we will find interesting, here is ancient Christian artwork of the Elohim creating Adam. And like I always tell y'all, Adam is another form of Aten or Adon or Odin or Tun and all of these other gods that I've been mentioning. So here is the Elohim creating Adam. And as you can see, Adam has serpent legs. Yes, Adam was an anguiped, just like Abraxas. The original form of Christ was an anguiped, which is why Christ is taking the form of a serpent in early Christianity. You know, Moses predate Christ. So this was the Christ that Moses worshipped in his time. And during this time, this deity still had some of the original spiritual concepts associated with it, which is why Moses was a wise man. Because Moses would have broke down the fact that this deity was personifying a higher spiritual concept, just like I'm doing. So as we can see here, Adam and Yaldabaoth are one and the same. And when we see images of Yaldabaoth, he has those same serpent legs that we see here in this famous painting of Adam being created by the Elohim. The Elohim is basically putting his spirit into Adam. Adam is a drone, an earth drone, that the Elohim is using to have an experience in the earth realm. Adam is like a human rover for the Elohim. This reminds me of the movie Chucky, the very first one, when the guy put his spirit into the Chucky doll. This is the same concept of how our soul enters the body. This is just showing the baby in the fetal bag. And when the consciousness forms a body inside of the mother's fetal bag, it then enters that body that it formed. And this is showing the soul entering the body. This is all dealing with childbirth. He's literally personifying the baby in the uterus. That's why his hands is like this. And you can see the arch or the dome right here, the pregnant belly. This is the story of how God enters the flesh, or how soul enters the body. The consciousness creates a body for itself in the mother's fetus bag, then it enters that body. Again, that reminds me of the movie Chucky, when the man puts his soul into the doll. And I'll give you one more here. There's another form of this god called Baal Zephon, or Baal Siphon. And we know what a siphon is. It's a little tube made to pull liquid from one container into another. using suction energy. And the reason his name is Zephon or siphon is because his scepter literally represents the central nervous system, this rod that siphons the soul into the body. The crown chakra above the head is showing us this suction energy, this vacuum energy, this siphoning energy. This is how the mind exists within the body through a siphoning process. So the word Zephon is siphon. And this again is relating to the magician's wand and the scepter and all of these which I mentioned previously. So Baal-Zephon was an epithet of the Canaanite storm god Baal in his role as Lord of Mount Zephon. He is identified in the Ugaritic text as Hadad, and we will talk about Hadad in a minute. Because of the mountain's importance and location, it came to metonymously signify north in Hebrew. And they want you to think that this is north of some nation. This is really symbolizing the North Pole, like I've been teaching you this whole lecture. All right, Lord of the North, which is Santa Claus, as we see right here. So the name is therefore sometimes given in translation as Lord of the North. He was equated with the Greek god Zeus in his epithet Zeus Cassius, and later with the Roman Jupiter Cassius. So there's many forms of this same North Pole god that carries the pole or the scepter in his hand. Zeus being one, and we know when we say Jesus, we saying, hey, Zeus. So let's take a look at what Baal-Zephon looks like. Let's see what he looked like. Here's what he looked like again. Uncle Sam is another form of this god. Instead of giving Uncle Sam a scepter or making him hold his phallus, they just made him point his finger, which is another way of showing us this scepter as well. They do it in many ways. So this god, instead of having a scepter or a phallus, he has a sword. In the case of Luke Skywalker, it's a lightsaber. So there's many ways this has been symbolized throughout times in antiquity. But again, here's just another old bearded horned god. When they don't give them the horns, they give them the crown. The crown and the horns and the thorns, all of this on the head is no different than what we see with the Statue of Liberty with the spikes. So the Statue of Liberty have these spikes, and instead of having a torch, they gave them a sword. But we can see these same parallels. It's the same concept. It's different forms of the same deity. So now let's move on to Hadad. And we can read a bit about Hadad just to show you that he sinks in as well. So Hadad was also called Paida Rapil, or often simply Baal, meaning Lord, but this title was also used for other gods. Now this word Rapil is a word that looks very similar to Rupes, which is the name of the North Pole, Rupes nigra. So the word Rupes and Rapil is also related to another deity that we call the Reaper. The Reaper can be thrown in this lineup too. And if you want to learn more about the Reaper, how the Reaper relates to the Black Stone and the Virgin Mary, how she relates to the concept of Mount Meru, which is the North Pole, go and check out my pay-per-view presentation on the Sumerians. I'll leave a link to that in this video description. The bull was the symbolic animal of Hadad. Isn't that interesting? Because the bull is what I've been telling you guys about in relation to Hathor, the devil, and all these other deities. So we're spot on with the syncretism. And if we read more, we'll see how there are other forms of this god in other cultures. One of them called Ramanu. You know that this god has ram horns in some of his manifestations. And Thunderer is dealing with, Zeus holding the lightning bolt, Thunderer, right? These are all relevant to this same deity. And if you look at what he's holding, it's no different than Zeus holding the lightning bolt. This is the Jedi pillar or the lightsaber, another form of him representing the central nervous system. So the lightsaber is coiled together like a DNA strand. That's why it looks like that in his hand. And that's why the Zeus lightning bolt looks staggered like a DNA strand. This is what they're trying to reduplicate at CERN. I go over that a lot on my channel. But we all know that a faggot is a bundle of sticks. And that's really dealing with how the magnetic ley lines of the earth all meet up at the North Pole and get tied together into a braid. This is the god of the North Pole that's tying together all of the earth's magnetic ley lines into one big rope, or what we call the North Pole. So the images on the screen will show you several concepts that will depict this same concept I'm talking about of what's happening at the North Pole. That's why you see this god holding what appears to be something like a DNA strand. It's the same concept of the Jedi pillar or lightsaber. This is the way that the energy of all our chakra layers meet up at the central nervous system, at the spinal cord. All of these 7 chakras creates their own line of light at the middle of the self. And all 7 of these lines of light tether together to make a big braid. That takes place at the North Pole. And even at the North Pole of the earth, all of the magnetic ley lines come together and do the same thing. As within, so without. So this is the god of the North Pole that is braiding together all of the magnetic ley lines on the earth. Vishnu will show you this same concept in the form of him churning the Milky Sea. He's basically got this big old serpent that he's braiding up at the middle of the earth. And that serpent represents the Kundalini, the spirit, which is the spiral. These 7 chakras represent each of the colors on the light spectrum. We have a layer in each one of these 7. And so the light of each layer recycles itself through the center of the self. Like I said, it takes the form of this barber pole, this serpent wrapped around a tree trunk, which is this braid pattern. We see it with the Mercury caduceus as well. So we see he's holding in one hand an axe, just like the Reaper. And we see that the Reaper wearing a big skirt or a big dress, and he got a hook or an axe in his hand. They call it a scythe, which is no different than the sickle, synonymous with Santa's candy cane. So the reason he's holding this axe is because the word ripper again means to rip through something, to tear through something. So they give him this axe to symbolize he represents the North Pole. And at the North Pole, there's a tear in the fabric of time and space. There's an opening, a portal, a gateway that allows for entry and exit in and out of the simulation. So we read earlier that this god is equivalent to many old bearded gods with horns. And as we can see here, that's exactly what he got, showing us that our syncretism is once again spot on. I also wanted to point out how this god is in the middle of 4 other deities. And those 4 other deities represent the 4 continents that's surrounding the North Pole. This god represents Mount Meru, which is why he's mounted up, which is why we say the Lord must be uplifted. Remember that the word hover is hover. He's hovering above the physical plane. That's the mind. So other deities is Aladdin, which is Aladdin, because Aladdin flies on a magic carpet. This is the concept of Aladdin's magic carpet right here. So those four guys represents the four corners of the earth, which is at the middle of the earth, not the outside. Think of a four-way intersection, a four-way boulevard intersection. This is why the symbol of this god is a cross sign or an X sign. And this is why the root word of boulevard is bull. Because this god is the bull. He takes the form of a bull. And this is why the root word of elevator is L. Because the North Pole is like a tower elevator for the consciousness to ascend or descend. So we can also see other forms of this god, even in the Hindu/Jainism tradition, as we can see in this image right here. We have the main chief god mounted up at the top, just like Hadad, and he's surrounded by these other four gods, just like we see here. Is the same concept, just to show you that this was a very universal concept. Again, this wasn't exclusive to the Israelites. All right, they had their own God to personify this very universal concept. And what was exclusive to them was their own personification of it. And that one even exclusive to them, as we read earlier. This concept isn't exclusive to any group because it's a universal spiritual concept at the core of every single human being. And when I say that, I'm distinguishing man from mankind. Let's exclude them from this concept. So again, the serpent god Serapis is another form of this deity as well. And the word Serapis is a derivative of the word serpent. And the reason all of these gods are serpent gods, the whole connection with the serpent symbolism is again that these gods are personifying the center of the self, or the Kundalini energy, which resides in the spine. So that's what the serpent is. That's what the Caduceus staff was personifying. It's all about us, people, and the knowledge of us and the knowledge of our energy. So again, the whole parallels between the word penis and the word spine. There is a fractal code going on there with the syncretism, because they teach you that semen rise up through the shaft of the phallus. And we know that is true. But likewise, the Kundalini looks like a sperm cell, and it rises up the central nervous system, which looks exactly like the shaft of a phallus. So we have this connection here of sex magic, sex symbolism associated with resurrection. But it's easy to only deal with the act of physical sex and deal with the concept of birth versus the spiritual aspect that I'm revealing to you now, which is related to conception, how the soul gets into the body. Again, the mother and the father are like 6-9 vortex winds that are opening up a portal. This allows for your soul to enter the earth realm. But since it's traveling through the portal that the mom and daddy made, that plays out in the earth realm as you being made of their DNA. They forged the path that you took to get here. And your journey here as a spirit will dictate how you become when you're born. Just like they say your past can shape your future, this was part of your spiritual history. This is the DNA, the memory of the soul on who it is. It chose the mama and daddy because it can only be who it needed to be through those two, which is why the Greeks created the concept of a Cupid. And they basically teach the same thing, that the children choose the parents don't choose the child. And we can see the Cupid is shooting an arrow, and that goes back to that whole concept of javelin, the concept of Orion, the concept of the lightsaber, which is the consciousness being transported into the body. The thing about it is, when mama and daddy open up the vortex, the consciousness enters the vortex as a form of a lightning rod, a rod of light. And they show you this in a lot of images that NASA give you of the birth of a galaxy. When they give you this spiral that's being penetrated by a beam of light. That's really the true cosmology of the earth we live in. And it's based on the ancient concepts. So our consciousness enters this reality as a rod of light. And they also show you this with an astronaut getting spaghettified. The astronaut is representing the sperm cell. And when he enters the black hole, that's the sperm cell entering the egg. And when that happens, the sperm cell gets spaghettified, stretched out into a rod of light. And that rod of light, that magician's wand, that scepter, that Statue of Liberty torch seats itself in the middle of the body. And it acts as the sole controller of the body. And it is what we call the mind. It kind of make me look at these streaks of light in the sky differently. They tell us, well, that's a comet, that's an asteroid. But these asteroids and comets shape just like sperm cells. The ancestors taught that as above, so below. The concept of birth and the stars, the way I'm telling you here, let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And they taught that we are the stars. So it kind of makes me wonder, what if when you seeing these streaks of light go across the sky, you're literally seeing souls get spaghettified. You're literally seeing consciousness falling from a higher plane as a form of a little lightning rod, a zap of light that literally gets sucked into some woman's egg in some hospital. What if we're literally seeing someone's consciousness arrive in the fetal bag, as I mentioned previously? This is just a wild theory, but it just made me think of that based upon the connections with the symbolism and everything. So it's interesting to think of that concept, that what if asteroids or comets and all of these little streaks of light are conscious beings landing into bodies in the earth realm. Like it's literally raining souls. And maybe these streaks of light are always taking place, but we don't always see them all the time. Maybe if we had the right equipment to see real clearly into this dimension, we would just see these things shooting down everywhere. Because we see them come and go, they vanish before they land. But that's how spaghettification works as well. Because at the event horizon of a black hole, it's an exponential stretching. You're moving at an exponential rate, so it's doubling up, tripling up, quadrupling up with the rate by which it stretches you as you enter the hole, right? The closer you get to it. So the closer you get to the event horizon, the more that the stretching increases. And you will get stretched so much at the event horizon that you would be so thin, you would damn near be nano, you will be invisible. So think of something having a broad, thick base and being stretched to a fine, thin point like a Hershey's Kisses. This is the concept of a Santa Claus hat, of the whole birth concept, the North Pole concept. This is why it'll look like the closer that this thing get to its destination, the more it vanish. So when we see these lights in the sky, you never see them land on the ground. They vanish before they hit the ground. And that's just more support for my bizarre theory that we may be seeing souls enter the earth or consciousness land. We may be witnessing the spaghettification process.
Yahweh was originally a war god. That is the general academic consensus concerning the nature of the national God of Israel, who became the monotheistic God of the Bible and Abrahamic religions. But if Yahweh was originally a war god, how did this war god become the God of the cosmos? Various Hebrew names associated with the Judahite narrative tradition mean light, shine, and lamp. For instance, Uriah in Hebrew means flame of Yahweh, or Yahweh is my flame. The priest Neriah means lamp of Yahweh. The name YWR also means Yahweh is my light. Sometime during the compilation of the Deuteronomistic history, in which the Judahite narrative is composed, names take on a significance indicating Yahweh as a figure of celestial light. Now, people, the celestial light that is mentioned here is referring to the pineal gland, which is the seat of the soul, or what I referred to earlier as the light of conception, which was also called the Star of Bethlehem. So we can see here that various Hebrew names associated with the Judahite narrative tradition means light, shine, and lamp. Again, this refers to the crown chakra, or the Most High, which is the brightest chakra of all chakras. It is the one that shines and acts as a lamp for all of the other chakras. Furthermore, the inclusion of the epithet Sabaoth means celestial or heavenly army/armies. While this retains the divine warrior inheritance, the shift toward army of heaven or celestial army rather than earthly army also implies the new celestial understanding of Yahweh. Yahweh Sabaoth literally means God of the heavenly armies. Yahweh Sabaoth is also part of the cosmic wrestling narrations of portions of the Bible considered part of the genre of cosmic chaos Kampf. There are two prevailing camps regarding the movement toward a celestial understanding of Yahweh, chiefly centered on the language of light and cosmos. The first is the recognition of the Egyptian and Assyrian influence over Judah. Judah, despite the pretensions of the biblical narrative, was often a vassal of other Near Eastern powers even during its independence. The change of Yahweh towards solar, cosmic, and celestial language and imagery occurs during a time of Egyptian vassalage and is, therefore, part of Egyptian influences in the temple cult and the understanding of Yahweh, or alternatively, during a time of Assyrian vassalage. Various archaeological discoveries dated to 8th and 7th century Judah reveal iconography that is reminiscent of the astral, solar, and celestial iconography of Egypt and Assyria.
Some researchers claim that Yahweh was an actual human being of high political rank, who became mythologized as an ethereal being at some point in time, likely after his death. There's a video in which the Germanic word Gott, which is the source of the English word God, originally referred to a man who became venerated by his descendants until eventually being mythologized into an ethereal being. Yahweh is documented on Sumerian stele as one of the Anunnaki elites who were worshipped in Sumer and its satellite cities as earth-walking gods by their populations and their slaves. In the city of Ur, Yahweh attached himself to Abraham Jr., and they fled a civil war to the more peaceful Levant to start a Sumerian colony, which eventually took on the name Samaria. Around 450 BCE, a Hebrew priest named Ezra wrote the story of Jericho, in which he portrayed his champion god as one that destroyed all life in what became the first Holocaust, as Yahweh was credited with the complete slaughter and burning of every living thing in Jericho, left behind by the more merciful Joshua. Joshua was condemned for his mercy by a bloodlusting Yahweh. This is where the root definition for colonial terrorism was discovered, as the use of violence and threats of violence to gain political control over the indigenous people and their land wealth. Ezra documented Yahweh's colonial terrorism in Jericho, and it's happening for the second time since then.
Many early Gnostic Christian texts claimed that Yahweh, the Creator, was a demiurge, false creator from the Apocryphon of John 120-180 AD. Now the Archon ruler, who is weak, has three names. The first name is Yaldabaoth, son of Chaos, the second is Saklas, fool, and the third is Samael, blindness of God, and he is impious in his arrogance which is in him. For he said, I am God, and there is no other God beside me. For he is ignorant of his strength, the place from which he had come. Early Gnostic Christians viewed Yahweh as a jealous God, false creator, and God of this world, often confusing him with the Most High known only to Gnostics. They considered themselves one who knows. They believed all things, including Satan, exist within God, as angels were seen as sons of God. Samael, sometimes called Satan in Hebrew texts, is considered the original Satan in Gnostic tradition. The connection between Yahweh and Satan stems from this association. The Ten Commandments hint at Yahweh being the demiurge, as indicated by, Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. This raises questions about the existence of other gods and who Yahweh was jealous of, suggesting a deeper theological complexity.
Yaldabaoth is a malevolent god and demiurge in various agnostic sects and movements, sometimes represented as a theriomorphic, lion-headed serpent. He is identified as the false god who keeps the souls trapped in physical bodies, imprisoned in the material universe. The etymology of the name Yaldabaoth has been subject to many speculative theories. Until 1974, etymologies deriving from the unattested Aramaic, supposedly meaning chaos, represented the majority view. Following an analysis by the Jewish historian of religion, Gershom Scholem, published in 1974, this etymology no longer enjoyed any notable support. His analysis showed the unattested Aramaic term to have been fabulated and attested only in a single corrupted text from 1859, with its claimed translation having been transposed from the reading of an earlier etymology, whose explanations seemingly equated darkness and chaos when translating an unattested supposed plural form of Hebrew. The first etymology was advanced in 1575 by Firidentius, supposedly translating it from Hebrew to mean Latin, apatribus genitus, the child of fathers. A theory proposed by Matter in 1828 claimed to have identified the name as descending from Hebrew child and from Hebrew behat, a supposed plural of Hebrew, emptiness and darkness. Matter, however, interpreted it to mean chaos, thus translating Yaldabaoth as child of darkness, an element of chaos. This etymology was popular due to its perceived literary merits. It has inspired Hilgenfeld to keep Matter's proposed chaos translation while fabulating a more plausible sounding but unattested second noun, claiming the name to derive from Aramaic, supposedly meaning child of chaos in 1884. This became the late 19th, early 20th century majority view, which was supported by Schenke. The latter two also cited a supposed attestation for Aramaic. This supposed attestation stemmed from a Targum and was merely a corrupted reading of Aramaic. The pseudo-variant was translated in Jastro's popular Aramaic dictionary as confusion. Helped by these events, Hilgenfeld's etymology remained the majority view until a 1974 analysis by Scholem explained its origin. Consequently, most scholars retracted their support. Additionally, Scholem argued that based on the earliest textual data, which termed Yaldabaoth the king of chaos, he was claimed to be the progenitor of chaos, not its progeny. Sholom's own theory rendered the name as Yald-Aboeth, Yald being Aramaic, Yalda but translated as begetter, not child, and Aboeth being a term invested in magic texts, descending from Hebrew. Thus he rendered Yald-Aboeth as begetter of Sabaoth. Black objects to this, because Sabaoth is the name of one Yaldabaoth's sons in sub-agnostic texts. Instead, he suggests the second noun to be Jewish Aramaic, shame, which is cognate with Hebrew, a term used to replace the name Baal in the Hebrew Bible. Thus, Black's proposal renders Aramaic Yalda Behuda, son of shame. In his proposed 1967 etymology, Adam, already diverted from then majority view and translated Aramaic, Yalda's similarity to Sholem as German, bringing forth, he believed the name's second part to derive from Syriac. This he interpreted, however, to describe more broadly the power of generation, thus suggesting the name to mean the bringing forth of the power of generation. From at least 200 BCE onwards, a tradition developed in the Greco-Egyptian Ptolemaic kingdom, which identified Yahweh, the God of the Jews, with the Egyptian god Seth. Following the Assyrian conquest of Egypt in the 7th century BCE, Seth was seen as an evil deity by the Egyptians and not commonly worshipped, in large part due to his role as the god of foreigners. Diverging from previous zoologically multiplicitous depictions, Seth's appearance during the Hellenistic period onwards was depicted as resembling a man with a donkey's head. The Greek practice of interpretatio Graeca, ascribing the gods of another people's pantheon to corresponding ones in one's own, had been adopted by the Egyptians after their Hellenization, during the process of which they had identified Seth with Typhon, a snake monster which roars like a lion. The story of the Exodus featuring in the Hebrew Bible speaks of the Jews as a nation betrayed and subjugated by the Pharaoh, for whom Yahweh subjects Egyptians to 10 plagues, destroying their country, defiling the Nile, and killing all of their firstborn sons. Jewish migration within the Hellenized Ptolemaic kingdom to Greek-speaking Egyptian cities such as Alexandria led to the creation of the Septuagint, a translation of the Hebrew Bible into Koine Greek. Furthermore, the story of the Exodus was adapted by Ezekiel the tragedian into the ancient Greek, a Greek play performed in Alexandria and seen by Egyptians and Jews. Egyptian receptions of the Exodus story were widely negative because it insulted their gods. Thus, it inspired Egyptian works retelling the story, but changing its details to mock the Jews and exalt Egypt and its gods. In this context, some Egyptians saw similarities between Yahweh's in-narrative actions and attributes and those of Seth, in addition to a phonetic resemblance between Koine Greek, Yahweh's name as used by Hellenized Jews, and Coptic, donkey, then seen as the animal of Seth. From this arose a popular response to the Jewish accusation that Egyptians were merely worshipping beasts, namely that, in truth, the Jews themselves worshipped a beast, a donkey or a donkey-headed man, Seth. Accusations of idolatry against the Jews spread from the Egyptian milieu, with its understanding of the donkey's Seth-related importance, to the rest of the Greco-Roman world, which was largely ignorant of this context. In the most famous variation of narratives alleging Jewish idolatry, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a Seleucid king famous for raiding the Jerusalem temple, supposedly discovered that its holiest of holies was not empty, but instead contained a donkey idol. After the emergence of Christianity, the same charge was also repeated against its followers, most famously so in the earliest known depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus In the most famous variation of narratives alleging Jewish onolatry, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a Seleucid king famous for raiding the Jerusalem temple, supposedly discovered that its holiest of holies was not empty, but instead contained a donkey idol. After the emergence of Christianity, the same charge was also repeated against its followers, most famously so in the earliest known depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus, the Alexamenus Graffito, where a Christian by the name of Alexamenos is shown worshiping a donkey-headed crucified god. According to Litwa, this tradition forms the basis for the development of agnostic beliefs about Yaldabaoth. Agnosticism originated in the late 1st century CE in non-rabbinical Jewish and early Christian sects. In the formation of Christianity, various sectarian groups labeled agnostics by their opponents emphasized spiritual knowledge of the divine spark within over faith in the teachings and traditions of the various communities of Christians. Agnosticism presents a distinction between the highest unknowable God and the Demiurge, creator of the material universe. Agnostics considered the most essential part of the process of salvation to be this personal knowledge, in contrast to faith as an outlook in the world view, along with faith in the ecclesiastical authority. In agnosticism, the biblical serpent in the Garden of Eden was praised and thanked for bringing knowledge to Adam and Eve, and thereby freeing them from the malevolent demiurge's control. Agnostic Christian doctrines rely on a dualistic cosmology that implies the eternal conflict between good and evil, and a conception of the serpent as the liberating savior and bestower of knowledge to humankind, opposed to the demiurge or creator God, identified with the Yahweh from the Hebrew Bible. Some agnostic Christians consider the Hebrew God of the Old Testament as the evil, false God and creator of the material universe, and the unknown God of the Gospel, the Father of Jesus Christ, and creator of the spiritual world, as the true good God. In the Archontic, Sethian, and Ophite systems, Yaldabaoth is regarded as the malevolent demiurge and false god of the Old Testament, who generated the material universe and keeps the souls trapped in physical bodies, imprisoned in the world full of pain and suffering that he created. However, not all agnostic movements regarded the creator of the material universe as inherently evil or malevolent. For instance, Valentinians believed that the demiurge is merely an ignorant and incompetent creator, trying to fashion the world as well as he can, but lacking the proper power to maintain its goodness. They were regarded as heretics by the proto-Orthodox early church fathers. Yaldabaoth is primarily mentioned in the Archonic, Sethian, and Ophite writings of agnostic literature, most of which have been discovered in the Nag Hammadi library. In the Apocryphon of John, Yaldabaoth is the first of 3 names of the domineering archon, along with Sanchez and Samael. In Pistis Sophia, he has lost his claim to rulership and, in the depths of chaos, together with 49 demons, tortures sacrilegious souls in a scorching hot torrent of pitch. Here he is a lion-faced archon, half flame, half darkness. Yaldabaoth appears as a rebellious angel both in the apocryphal Gospel of Judas and the agnostic work, Hypostasis of the Archons. In some of these agnostic texts, Yaldabaoth is further identified with the ancient Roman god Saturnus. Yaldabaoth is the son of Sophia, the personification of wisdom and agnosticism, with whom he contends. By creatively turning to matter in goodness and simplicity, Sophia created the imperfect Yaldabaoth, who has no knowledge of the other aeons. From his mother he received the powers of light, but he used them for evil. Sophia rules over the Ogdoas, the demiurge over the Hebdomades. Yaldabaoth created 6 more archons and other fellows. The angels he created rebelled against Yaldabaoth, To keep the angels in subjection, Yaldabaoth generated the material universe. In the action of creation, however, Yaldabaoth emptied himself of his supreme power. When Yaldabaoth breathed the soul into the first man, Adam, Sophia instilled in him the divine spark of the spirit. After matter, Yaldabaoth produced the serpent spirit, which is the origin of all evil. The light being Sophia caused the fall of man through the serpent. By eating the forbidden fruit, Adam and Eve became enlightened and turned away from Yaldabaoth. Eventually, Yaldabaoth expelled them from the ethereal region, the paradise, as punishment. Yaldabaoth continuously attempted to deprive human beings of the gift of the spark of light, which he had unwittingly lost to them, or to keep them in bondage. As punishments, he tried to make humanity acknowledge him as God. Because of their lack of worship, he caused a flood upon the human race, from which a feminine power such as Sophia rescued Noah. Yaldabaoth made a covenant with Abraham, in which he was obligated to serve him along with his descendants. The biblical prophets were to proclaim Yaldabaoth's glory, but at the same time, through Sophia's influence, they reminded people of their higher origin and prepared for the coming of Christ. At Sophia's instigation, Yaldabaoth arranged for the generation of Jesus through the Virgin Mary. For his proclamation, he used John the Baptist. At the moment of the baptism organized by Yaldabaoth, Sophia took on the body of Jesus and through it taught people that their destiny was the kingdom of light, not the kingdom of darkness. Only after his baptism did Jesus receive divine powers and could perform miracles. But since Jesus destroyed his kingdom instead of promoting it, Yaldabaoth had him crucified. Before his martyrdom, Christ escaped from the bodily shell and returned in the spiritual world.
In addition to all of the other deities that we compared and synced to Yahweh, there's another deity that I would like to focus on in synchronicity with Yahweh.